Good evening. My name is Tom Ritzenthaler, and I'm an executive principal at CS Arch, and I'm here to present to the Board of Education a supplemental information update to the Walden feasibility study. This was a presentation presented on March 10th, 2025. So the agenda really encompasses three items. First was an evaluation of the Alternative Learning Center at Maybrook in order to consider housing a K-5 elementary school program. Next, we looked at options and costs associated with grade level reorganization of the elementary grades. And third, we looked at options and costs associated with temporary relocation of the Walden Elementary School program to facilitate construction of a new school on the existing Walden site. As I always point out, the purpose of a school construction program is to improve the education of children. So we always like to keep the focus on the students. So let's talk about reestablishing the Alternative Learning Center at Maybrook as a K-5 elementary school. With any of these options, we are using the district's existing catchment boundaries for the elementary schools, and for kindergarten through fifth grade elementary at Maybrook, this would require space for 227 students. It would also require 11 to 12 general education classrooms, so that's 2 sections or 2 classrooms per grade level, 2 special education classrooms, instructional space for music, band, art, STEAM, and student support services. Those are things like OTPT, reading, ENL, and then also space for PE, such as a gymnasium, cafeteria, and library or a media center. So Maybrook can provide the requirements for a K-5 elementary program, but it would have the following exceptions. There is insufficient room for an art classroom, so this would require that art be put on a cart. 1 kindergarten classroom would be below the State Education Department's minimum space standards. 5 of the general education classrooms would be below the State Education Department's minimum space standards. 2 of the special education classrooms would be below the State Education Department's minimum standards. And when looking at the cafeteria space in comparison with the other elementary buildings, this would require 4 lunch periods to accommodate the anticipated 227 students. This cafeteria is nearly half the square footage of any other cafeteria in the other elementary buildings. So the recommended capital upgrades to provide for this K-5 conversion of the ALC at Maybrook would require renovations to provide for the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. And this would include things like an elevator, upgraded toileting to meet ADA standards, and building-wide ADA compliant signage. We would be looking at doing a flooring abatement and replacement for hazardous materials abatement, the replacement of interior doors, the creation of an outdoor play space, including replacement of the existing playground, consideration for air conditioning, window replacement, including some lintel replacements to those window systems, and we would do that building-wide. And then, of course, renovations to the existing library to transform it into a multifunctional media center. So the costs of these improvements, you can see we've categorized into a few different categories, actually 2 categories. One was work that was identified in the last building conditions survey, so the BCS renovations, that represents a little over $2.6 million. And then we had other improvements that were recognized as part of the district's 5-year capital plan, renovations, of course, and those totaled a little over $4.3 million. If we escalate these costs to what we would anticipate midpoint of construction, as well as provide for incidental expenses to construction, things like architect engineers fees, testing during construction, insurances, administrative costs, project oversight, we would end up with a total capital project cost estimated at a little over $9.4 million. So let's talk about the grade level reorganization options. The first option we looked at was splitting the elementaries into K through 2 and 3 through 5. In this model, Walden, East Coldenham, Montgomery, and Maybrook would be kindergarten through 2nd grade elementary buildings, and Berea as a 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade elementary building. Enrollment for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades is approximately 845 students, and remember that uses the district's existing catchment boundaries. This exceeds the capacity available at Berea Elementary School. Enrollment of kindergarten through 2nd grade is 857 students and would require 43 classroom sections. Between Walden, East Coldenham, Montgomery, and Maybrook, those buildings provide a capacity of 72 classroom sections. So this would result in 29 undesignated classroom sections. To really consider this option, we would need to consider 3 elementary buildings at grades K through 2 and 2 elementary buildings at grades 3 through 5. Next, we looked at a grade level reorganization of buildings at K through 4th grade and a 5th through 6th grade organizational model. So in this model, Walden, East Coldenham, Montgomery, and Maybrook would serve kindergarten through 4th grade elementary buildings, and Berea would serve as a 5th and 6th grade elementary building. Again, using the district's current catchment boundaries, this organizational model results in an enrollment at Maybrook requiring 16 classrooms. Maybrook can only provide for 12 at most general classroom sections, with the other limitations I previously outlined in the presentation. The next organizational model we looked at is elementary schools of kindergarten through 3rd grade and a 4th and 5th grade organizational model. So in this model, Walden, East Coldenham, Montgomery, and Maybrook would serve kindergarten through 3rd grade as elementary buildings and Berea as a 4th and 5th grade elementary building. Now, based upon the district's existing catchment boundaries and class size guidelines, the K3 structure would be as follows. So you can see each of the buildings listed, Walden, Montgomery, East Coldenham, and Maybrook, the sections per grade level that would be required, the number of classrooms, and in the last column, the number of unused classroom sections based on the space available. And so you can see in buildings like Montgomery, we would have 9 classrooms that would be undesignated for any purpose. And across all of the buildings, we would have a total of 12 classrooms that would be unused in this model. So we looked at a K3, 4, 5 organizational model, and using the current February 2025 enrollment for 4th and 5th grades district-wide, that's 573 students. We have 289 4th grade students and 284 5th grade students. At the district's class size guidelines, each grade level will require 11 classroom sections, averaging 26.3 students per classroom in grade 4 and 25.8 students per classroom in 5th grade. Both of those are within the district's class size guidelines. Berea would have sufficient capacity for a 4th and 5th grade configuration, maintaining current average class size below the class size guidelines. This would also provide for 5 special education classrooms. It would provide for an art room, a music room, a band room, STEAM, resource and student support spaces. This also maintains a large-scale conference room and also 1 undesignated classroom space. So you can see in this configuration, this organizational model would work. So looking at it from a capital budget expenditure, if we look at the Maybrook Elementary scope that was identified earlier, those costs would remain. So you'd have the approximately $9.4 million worth of improvements. And then if we look at the upgrades to Walden Elementary, that would be recommended to bring this building up to current standards as well as current minimum education department standards. So there we have identified building condition survey renovations of a little over $7.8 million, 5-year capital renovations of a little over $2.3 million, Renovations to provide for SED standards and code compliance, $15.5 million. We have some demolition, select demolition, some furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and some site work. That's $2.5 million. And if we escalate these values to the midpoint of construction and add in the incidental expenses as I described before, we end up with a total project cost between Maybrook and Walden of a little over $47.5 million. So now we looked at Berea as a 4, 5, 6th grade school. So for Berea to accommodate a 4th through 6th grade program, it would really require the construction of an annex to the existing building. And that annex would need to provide for 12 additional general education classrooms, 2 special education classrooms, 1 classroom each for science, art, music, and STEAM, an auxiliary gym, student support spaces, a 6th grade house or administrative office, a teacher's lounge, and then of course mechanical and other support spaces such as toileting, IT, general storage. We took a look at how this annex would lay out on the existing building and the existing footprint. Of course, the site is certainly big enough to meet all of the education department minimum standards for site acreage. And you could see the 6th grade annex would just be another wing off of the existing building that's currently there. The annex would provide for efficiencies with certain shared student support spaces, such as use of the cafeteria, library, and nursing. It would be more cost effective than a standalone school building. And considering the state education department is unlikely to provide any building aid for additional elementary space beyond the current existing buildings, this would be certainly more efficient from that standpoint. Berea's site is certainly large enough, as I said, to construct the annex without the need of a site variance, and the conceptual programming of the annex provides for a building of addition of approximately 30,400 square feet. So if we look at a budget estimate for the annex, the construction cost estimate for that 30,400 square feet to serve approximately 300 students would total about $22 million, a little over $22 million. Incidental costs for construction are estimated at $2.4 million, and that again accounts for design and engineering fees, construction oversight, construction testing, insurance, bonding, legal, and other associated costs. So we would estimate the total project cost for the annex at about $26.4 million. So when we look at this across all of the various options that we looked at as part of the original Walden feasibility study, as well as the supplemental information for either reestablishing Maybrook as a K-5, the reorganization into a K-3, 4, 5, or creation of a Berea annex, you can see that for Maybrook as a K-5, we're looking at costs of approximately $9.4 million. For the reorganization into K-3, 4, 5 configuration, we're looking at $47.5 million. And again, that's before New York State building aid. And for the Berea annex, again, $26.4 million. And you can see now we've estimated the building aid for each of these projects. And then we've amortized that over a loan term of anywhere between 180 months, 15 years, or for the annex, 240 months for 20 years. And there we show the resultant loan payment on an annual basis, as well as the total payments across the entire project. So now let's look at the temporary relocation of Walden. So options and costs associated with temporarily relocating the Walden Elementary program to allow for the construction of a new school on the existing Walden site. We looked at 4 options. Option 1 was to relocate all the students to existing space around the district, as well as using portable classroom units on a specific site. And we estimate the cost between $1.85 million to $2 million for this option. And that would represent about a two-year period of construction. The second option was to move the Alternative Learning Center to the middle and high schools and relocate the K through 2 students to the vacated Maybrook building. We haven't estimated the full cost. That's still to be determined. A third option would be to move 5th grade to existing space around the district and relocate the K through 4th grades to mobile classrooms on an existing site. And again, based on an approximate 2-year construction program, we would estimate the cost for this option from between $1.35 million to $1.5 million. And then the fourth option would be to move district-wide 5th grade to existing space around the district and use other buildings for the K through 4th grade students. And again, we haven't been able to specify what this estimated cost is to date. Now, in any of these options, there are other considerations. First, while the options outlay where the students would go and within classroom spaces, it still doesn't account for how we service specialized instructional areas, PE, the cafeteria, and lunch service, and student support functions. It also doesn't take into consideration any potential additional transportation costs. It also would need to reflect the space for administration and staff and where they would be located, as well as for appropriate play space for the students in each of the grade levels. That concludes the presentation, and we'll open it up for questions.